This week on the Men at the Movies podcast, we ride the roller coaster of parenthood. We put too much pressure on ourselves as parents, feeling like we have to be perfect so that we don't break our children and ruin their lives. And even though life is messy, it's in the messes that we find the most meaning. Like Proverbs 14:4 says, you won't get a bountiful harvest without a barn full of crap. And even if you feel like your whole life is have to, I have good news for you. It doesn't have to be. Join me as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being.
Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me via the interwebs down in Hotlanta, my buddy Britt. Hey Britt, how you doing today, man?
I am doing pretty well. How are you?
Good. We're going to air this the week after Father's Day, so I hope that you've had a good Father's Day.
Right.
We wanted, and in sort of commemoration, celebration, recognition, whatever other word you can put in, we wanted to do that epic fatherhood film, Parenthood. I think Britt's just trying to do whatever he can to get movies back from the 1980s.
Definitely. Not all of them. You know, when I still haven't given all of my favorite movies. I still thought of 3 or 4 more I didn't put on text because I
asked him,
was annoying you.
What's your top 10 movies? And he's currently in the 30s.
Oh, easily.
And I think we might have a podcast where we talk about your top movies in an effort to make you whittle them down to your top 10.
I probably could, but I was just trying to, off the top of my head, think what were my, like if I had to think what were my all-time favorite movies. But there was a pretty good span in there between the 40s and 50s and 60s. And
yep, you had everything from Harvey to Ong Bak.
Did you look that up?
Yes, I had to. I had no idea what that was.
It is one of the best martial arts movies ever. It is so good. And it was, anyway, it was made in Thailand. And so it's like, it's totally different culture and story. And so, yeah, totally cool. But stuff like that where, so yes, I am a little more attached nostalgia wise to that era because as a young man, right, I think maybe it has a little bit more impact on you and it's a little more of a formative time. But you know, I like movies from all spans. But yeah, I always kind of go back in there.
I'm pretty sure Say Anything is going to be a fixture in your top 10 though.
Oh, it's always number 1.
Oh, number 1, huh?
As far as I'm not saying it's the best movie ever.
No.
I am saying my favorite movie, number 1, is always reserved for Say Anything. Yes.
So this is not your top movie, obviously. We're talking about Parenthood. No. But this is one of the movies I think you threw out on the list. And as we were talking on the pre-show.
The pre-party.
Pre-party. Patrons got access to see some of the squirrely stuff that we talk about in the beginning. In our pre-show, which some of our patrons, if you want to support us, go to go to menatthemovies.com/podcast if you want to get some in-depth stuff. But go to patreon.com/menatthemovies if you want to support us. And when you support us, you get some cool stuff like you get to be involved like live in our virtual studio here and see us as we wrestle with how we're going to talk about it. We've been talking for over 30 minutes now to try to figure out how we're going to spin this movie. But it had when we talked about it having a When Harry Met Sally feel to it, which if you think about it from sort of one way of thinking, this could be what happens 10 years after When Harry Met Sally.
Sure. Yeah.
And so there are many stories going on. It's really difficult to sort of focus on one because they're all really good. I told Britt after I watched it, I was an emotional wreck. because as I've gotten older, as my kids have gotten older, I'm like, oh, I've been through those situations literally. And, it's more, when your kids are 2, 6, and 9, this movie's not going to resonate quite as much because you haven't gone through the stuff Dianne Wiest goes through with Julie and Todd and Gary. But like, I've dealt with a lot of those types of things, situations with my own kids. So when you see the culmination and you see the heart of the parents coming through, it brings up all the feels.
Well, and I'm sure they did this on purpose, but this movie has a lot of different characters that you can probably relate to one.
At least.
So when I was a kid, like when this movie came out, I was still in high school. So therefore, as much as I probably made fun of Keanu Reeves, like I could relate to the Keanu Reeves sort of to some degree, right? I just want to race cars or whatever. I want to do this. And my friends stole the stuff and I'm in love
without you, Julie.
Can't live without you, man. And all that sort of stuff. But then they have the young family that has the young girl. She's like in preschool. She's not even in kindergarten yet. And then they have the family that's the Gills family, which are more like younger kids, but more elementary school age. And then so they've got a little bit of everything.
Jason Robards' character with the adult children,
who's got adult kids and grandkids and having to deal with. Now, it would bother me if people related too much to the Larry character, I guess. But I guess, but we can all
worrisome.
we can all relate to that desire, right, to get rich quick. Like, don't we all dream about
leave
that?
Our mark, or
leave our mark, and how, and just, but also the heartbreak of Jason Robards to see that where he's failed and as much as what he offered Larry at the end was complete wisdom. It was such wisdom. What a great arc for Jason Robards' character. What was his name? Nathan. And how he comes back around. Or no, that was Rick Moranis. Frank. And how he comes back around to doing something responsible and loving, which is what he did with Larry. Like that what he offered him there at the end.
Well, and even when he rejected him, when Larry said, yeah, that's great. But how about this? Knowing, and Frank's sitting there knowing he's not coming back. He's like, well, what about your son? What about Cool? Which I think also resonated with me because my grandson looks a lot like him. Yeah. He's like Cool's a little older, but my grandson, he's 2.5. We get to hang out. I get to spend a lot of time with him. I get to watch him while my daughter goes to work. And in a way, it's almost like he gets to, for me even, and which probably was why it resonated with me. It's like, I get it almost like a do-over. I get to try it again. I get to try to do it better this time.
Well, and I think most grandparents, that's part of the joy, right? I mean, all of us have made mistakes raising kids. I don't care. You can be a great parent and still have made mistakes. Like every kid is going to have something that they can point to with their parents and say, you weren't perfect at this, right? There's only one person that we can look at and not say that, and that's God. He's the only one. And so therefore, it's one of those things where, but after you've gone through that and made so many or some mistakes, now that you have grandkids, it's one of those issues of, man, now I get to put into practice some of the things I learned, right? Now I get to just not worry as much. I get to not get so anxious every time I'm around kids. I mean, so I think that's part of the joy with grandkids, right? You're like, man, you do kind of have a second chance to have a positive impact. And many grandparents do.
Because the movie's rather chaotic, it bounces around from character to character. This is going to also be a very scattered, dare we say, messy podcast. We're going to be bouncing around, but I want to start with this clip because something you were saying there, I think is really important. And in this clip, Steve Martin's son, Kevin, Steve Martin's his character is Gil. So Gil's son, Kevin, has lost his retainer at the Chuck E. Cheese back when it was, what was it back then?
It was Chuck E. Cheese or Showbiz or whatever.
Showbiz Pizza, yeah. Where a kid can be a kid.
Yeah.
And so he's back there in the trash looking through the garbage for his son because his son is he's freaky. He's weird. He gets stressed out. He's obsessive. He makes weird faces when he gets stressed. And so his dad, Gil, he coaches his little league team. He becomes this cowboy Dan to provide this awesome birthday for him. And all this effort and all this work that he goes into, because as you mentioned, there's always something. We can always look at something we didn't do great. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as dads, as moms, as husbands and wives to think we have to do it perfect. And this is what he's experiencing as he's going through the trash. And his wife comes back and she helps him. She's like, basically, we lost $200. We go through the trash if you lost a $200 bill. Sorry. And so this is them as he's going and he's stressing out because what he sees is in Kevin is he's getting worse. He's freaking out more. Like he has a total nervous breakdown there in the Chuck E. Cheese when he realizes he loses his retainer. But in a lot of men, fathers specifically, put this sort of pressure on ourselves when we are dealing with our kids.
Let's face it, he's getting worse.
He has his good days and he has his bad days.
Why is he so high-strung? He's like a poodle. Everything's blown out of proportion. Where does he get this obsessive behavior?
I wish I knew.
They're gonna put him in special ed.
Gil, what'd you think? That you'd dress up like a cowboy and coach Little League and Kevin would be fine?
No. No, I didn't. Yeah, okay, I did.
Well, honey, you were really kidding yourself.
You know, when your kid is born, it can still be perfect. You haven't made any mistakes yet. And then they grow up to be like me.
And it's funny, like I related to that conversation because there was a time when my son, who's in college now, but when he was in grade school, elementary school, he wasn't really good at reading. And so we had him tested. We found out he had ADHD, like me. But then, sort of as he's going through the testing is like, oh, he might have dyslexia. He might have some sort of something going on. And then your heart breaks, not just for the kid moving forward and how hard his life will be, but even for the back, because it was like, oh man, I feel so bad for harassing him about not reading well.
Right.
And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. It's like our kids are perfect. And then we haven't had a chance to mess them up yet, is how we look at it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a little like, I think on the one, both sides are sort of to the two extremes. Like she said, I think you were kidding yourself thinking that you could do these. He'd turn out fine. I think it's also kidding ourselves to think, well, he was perfect and I screwed everything up.
Yeah. They were told by the school about this, and they started getting all defensive, and the parents did. Gil and what was her name? Karen or something, and
Karen,
Helen or something. And they started getting all defensive, and the school psychologist or the counselor, whoever he was, he goes, this isn't a failure of yours. And here's what we do.
Which they totally blew off.
Right. Well, you smoke pot, I did not, and he's totally ratting her out to the teacher. It's really funny. But here's what we do. We make our kids' problems our own. And to some degree, that's good, because when we love a kid or when we love a person, we shouldn't want them to suffer needlessly, right? We shouldn't want them to. But at the same time, people are going to go through problems that we cannot fix and that we cannot control, and they were not our fault. And there is a little bit of that selfishness that rises up within us that wants to make it about us, right? And it's such an honest moment with the Jason Robards character later, when he was like, do you know that we thought you had polio? We had you tested. He said, I hated you for that. It's such an honest moment. Like, I don't think any parent, like, you'd have to be somebody like his character, I guess, that they set up, that to be that honest and be like, but because of the way that made me feel, I felt so helpless. I felt like a failure. And that is, again, a man's number one fear is failure, because he was created to achieve. He was created to do things. He was created. Now, that doesn't mean, that has its own set of problems, but we have to realize that that's man's greatest, a man's greatest fear. With females, it's her greatest fear is abandonment, right? And so these two fears kind of, feed off each other. We'll call it the fear cycle or whatever they want to call it. And so, but to make a man feel loved, this is all interconnected, right? To make a man feel loved, you make him feel respected. And then to make a woman feel loved, you make her feel safe, right? Those are the opposite of those other things, right? And so I'm saying all that to say is that he makes it about himself because he feels like a failure. But by the end of the movie, he realizes it's kind of not about me. Kevin needs this stuff. Kevin's going to need therapy. I didn't want to put him in therapy, but I think he needs it. And talking as a father, and my wife and I having to wrestle with that, putting our own children into therapy. We have one child who was still in therapy, and then we were like, okay, these problems are coming up. We can't ignore them. But you struggle with this, like, where did I go wrong? What did I do? Like when they were 2, I said this, you start, coming up with all this crap. And I'm not saying we were perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying that we had Hosanna tested, my daughter, and she legitimately has ADHD. I didn't think she had. I thought she had some sort of anxiety issue. And they're like, no, the anxiety is coming from the ADHD. Right. And so it's all of this stuff. I'm not saying all this to say I've been through that struggle of what did we do? I don't want to do this, but because it's about the kid, I have to do this. And it just goes into the whole, he's obsessive and he's cleaning his hands and he hates messes. And he keeps being confronted with the mess of life. And that's one of the main themes that we're going to kind of deal with here.
I want to put a pin in that concept, because we're going to circle back to that idea. Like he has to go to special ed. He has to get therapy.
Right.
And when you look at when the movie opens, it opens on basically an 8 or 9-year-old Gil at the ball game, because his dad would take him once a year on his birthday. They'd get there late because his dad was dealing with the bookies. He'd park him down, pay an usher to keep watch of him, and his dad would go off. And I thought that was a really great scene, because especially my boys have gone through sports, they're going through sports, but it's awakening my 15, 16, 17-year-old issues. And right. I'm reacting the way to, if they're on the bench, I'm upset because I know how I felt when I was on the bench. But what he's doing is in that moment, he's looking at his dad and all the failures. What a shitty dad he had. And he really, in a lot of ways, still despises and hates his dad. Blames his dad for how he turned out. And he was determined not to do the same. And so in many ways, even though he's different, he's still seeing himself as his father as breaking his son. And I'm not saying, like you said, our parents have an impact. They do stuff that we wish they didn't. They shape us and form us in so many different ways. You know, Todd, when in that I thought that scene was great when he was talking to Helen and like, oh, it's, you know, when she was like, oh, he needs a man in his life. It's like, I don't know about that. I wake up with, you know, to cigarettes getting flicked in my face saying, hey, asshole, wake up.
Yeah. It depends on the man, he said. It depends on the man.
Right. Exactly. And that idea, that pressure to realize, to recognize, yeah, our parents did impact who we are. We impact who our kids, I don't even think who they are, because I think God determines who they are, but how they grow up and how they become who they are. You know, it's this idea that if you're weightless, if you don't do like high impact exercises, your bones actually get weaker. They need the impact to strengthen their bones. And what happens as your kids grow up, as you know, my kids now range from 16 to 28. What happened to them that we wish it didn't happen it actually creates in them who they're supposed to be. When I was going through a difficult time with my daughter, I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to do. And what God told me was, he reminded me of two things. He said, I love her more than you do. Can't fight God on that one. God for sure loves our kids more than we do.
Amen.
And the other part is, I am using this to help her become the woman I created her to be. What a relief that is. If we say that over our kids of whatever they're going through, even, you know, the issues that you've been dealing with Micah, with the attitude, which by the way, they all go through. There's always a period of life where like, man, that kid's a dick. and it's such a relief when they start coming out of it. But every kid that we've had has gone through that, where you're just like, oh my gosh, they're a horrible human being. They're just surly. They're yelling. Like, why are you so mad? I'm not mad. You seem a little mad. I'm not. Why are you bothering me? Get off my back. And we think that we're to blame.
Give me money.
Yeah, I need money. I want to go see my friends. Okay.
But I'm not mad.
The hormones. But we think that we carry too much blame. And really, I remember seeing this study, and I can't even remember the source or anything. I just remember that it said that we think that like the gap between like average dad and great dad is like has this huge impact. Basically, it's like, don't suck as a dad and you'll do fine. There's like minimal, you know, differences in the kids as they grow up. But it's like, as long as you're there, as long as you're not beating them, you know, as long as you're not being a negative, consistent, horrible influence, they're going to be fine.
Yeah. Because even an average dad provides that security that gives a frame of reference. Like I said, there's only one perfect father, and that's God. So none of
we aren't it,
and I ain't it. And you know, and there's a lot to this, but in the sense of even an average dad that's just there, he just shows up. Like that's the first step. You're showing up, and that's why when we tell people that, it's an encouragement to say like, you showing up is good. Like that alone puts you on a level of doing something positive, just the fact that you showed up. Because there's a lot of guys who leave, don't show up, like we saw in the movie, right? Some of the impacts that had. You just start showing up and keep showing up, and no, you're not going to be perfect. But even great dads aren't perfect. Even great dads, like I said, your kids are going to be able to go, you weren't great at this. And you're right, I'm not. I tell my kids all the time, I'm not perfect. I'm not, that's even if I'm wrong about something, I'm not this wrong. I'm not wrong enough that you get to like be totally mad at me. Like I haven't abused you. I haven't like even if I'm wrong and I get the rules like 5% wrong here and there or whatever, like it's not that bad. Like you'll realize that one day when you're 30 or 35 or 40 and you have kids, and you'll realize like, you know what? Like this ain't as easy as it looks. And at least definitely from the other side. And so, I love how the movie starts, because you're right. He's got the little dream, but he's trying to take his kids to the base. He's in the middle of doing that, right?
The way that he wanted to be taken.
The way that he wanted, but it's a mess. Like he's got to, it's a mess.
There's no way. Like in the summer, it's so hot, loaded down, just like going to the beach. It sucks.
It's awful. and then they're like, again, the theme of the movie is life is a mess. So that's what I told Paul, and they literally state that as the theme later on in the movie, which we'll get to. But so it was a mess getting to the car. It was chaotic getting to the car, and then the kids singing the diarrhea song all the way, but that's kids. Like whoever made this movie,
money well spent right there.
And one of the, I
mean, didn't you sing it when you were 12? The diarrhea song? Yes. Makeup.
And then one of the first scenes, which is actually, I saw an interview with Ron Howard, where he talked about, he put this scene in the movie because it actually happened to him, was when the daughter, her stomach was hurting, and Gil comes into the room. And he's like, "Are you feeling okay?" He's like, "Do you want to throw up?" And she says, "Okay." And like pukes all. And Ron Howard said, "That's in the movie because that actually happened to me." Like that. Like, and so like you get this as much as there are things in the movie that are uncomfortable at times and sad, but like you get this piece in the movie, like, man, yeah, this is real. Like this is a real movie. Like this stuff happens. I'm not alone. I'm not the only guy who started to become amorous with his wife, and she stops and go, "Oh, so tomorrow, remember to pick up." And I'm like, well, time out. Like, that's what you were thinking? And totally derails the amorous moment, right? Like these moments are so real. And so we can laugh at them. Some great comedians, can do that. Like they'll bring up a real situation, make fun of it a little bit, and we can all relate. But just that theme as we go through, I love the focus on kids and babies being born at the end. Like there's so many great arcs in this movie that every character grows a little bit. Every character has a little bit of growth, and it's because it's within the framework of family and accepting that as imperfect as the family is, there's really still nothing better than this. Like this is still the best we got. As imperfect as it is, as much as you're not gonna live in my house like that. Okay, fine. You don't you ever come back. And then she comes and she leaves. Come back. You can come
Julie,
back
baby.
anytime.
I'm sorry. By the way, had very, very similar conversations with my daughter.
And we all can relate to those feelings of like, oh yeah, you're gonna do that in my house. Well, get out of it. You can't do that in my house. And then it's like, no, but if you ever need anything, just call me. Like we all feel that, but it's so real. And here's the thing: this is just a big idea. But remember, when God decided, the perfect plan was to spread creative order all over the world through family. That was the perfect plan. Adam and Eve, they were supposed to be fruitful and multiply, have kids. So parenthood was literally the redemptive story. But then because God within himself is a family, he's Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Like this is him emanating himself through his creation. Okay. And so then when the Tower of Babel happened, they didn't do it by family. They were united to build their own thing to try to go up, not out. See what I'm saying? Yeah. And family expands. It doesn't reach up. Family expands. And you see that in the movie. In the end, she was dating the biology teacher, but now she's married to him. Like the family expanded. They adopted Cool or whatever. They, like all of that stuff. Family expands and gets bigger. There's always more room in family. That's an eternal idea. Does that make sense? Like family is eternal because you can always expand it. And so, but the opposite of what happened at the Tower of Babel is God went to a man with one wife and who had never had a kid and said, you're going to have a family. Oh, yeah? Well, I don't even have a kid, right? But like God's redemptive plan was through family again. And so this movie, as messy as it is, it really has an important message to us that as imperfect as it is, because we're not Adam and Eve before the fall, like we are imperfect and we got problems. But as imperfect as that is, there's still something sort of holy within it. And that's almost that sense that you get. I don't mean holy in a religious, like you can't talk in church way. I mean holy, like there's something sacred about it. You know what I'm saying? Like when some people hear holy.
No, I just never heard that. Like, don't talk in church.
Like, but like when a lot of people hear holy, they think of, and we'll get to this, they think of religion where you don't get to do anything. We just got to jump through hoops. But holy like this is something real and genuine, and this is reality. This is something of substance that's real.
Yeah. I mean, holy means set apart. It means different. It means, sacred, but again, that's another one of those religious words. But yeah, holy, we think of, the idea of, I don't know, I get this picture of somber faces and oh, and holy just means we are set apart. Like this is, we have holy moments.
We're different. But isn't that what we do when we gather with family? When we gather with family, we're not saying we hate everybody. We're saying we're different from everybody. We are connected and we're different. And this is, but that doesn't mean we don't allow other people in. That just means there is a separation, because when we have Mooney family time and we allow other people in, it's our family. And this is us having a family time.
Well, and one of the most holy moments working as a nurse in the emergency department that I've gotten to be a part of is death is very holy. To be a part of that.
Amen.
But birth is also, and when a child comes into the world and
you feel it.
Yeah. It's like it's a holy moment.
Like it's a weird feeling.
Super gross.
But that's the whole movie. That's the theme of the movie. Birth is gross. Like messy, birth,
right?
It is messy. There's all sorts of blood and gook and all sorts of crap coming out. Like there's pooping happening. There's all sorts of stuff happening. And I always make this joke.
Unless she asks, then the answer is no, you didn't.
Yeah, right. But they showed the health film in high school. And they showed the birth in health class in high school. And every teenage girl came out of that class going, I never.
Oh no, it's a traumatic experience.
I never want to have a baby. And then for the longest time, when women get together, I don't know what it is about women who have babies. They have to tell, they try to one up each other as who has the worst baby birth stories.
Which is great, because they're telling someone who just announced that they were pregnant, and they're telling all the horrible things.
Well, here's what happened with my wife is Because my wife told me when we were first like serious and engaged, she's like, I don't know if I'm ever going to want kids. I said, yeah, you will. And she got mad at me because she was like, how do you know? She got all mad at me. I'm like, you will one day. It's okay. And if not, we'll adopt. Like, I can do that. And so all of this stuff. But like, so we'd be in those conversations where the women are like, I was in labor for 8 weeks and my pain was a 12 and the epidural never worked and they did it in my toe
see my feet for months
and whatever. They go on and on and on trying to one up each other. Well, I split completely in half and they had to sew me up. Like they keep like one upping each other. And then my wife would go, I'm never doing that. But when it changed was when they told those stories, and my wife went, I don't care. I still want a baby. Oh. Because at some point, life is worth it. Life is worth the mess. And as messy as birth can be, man, when you hold that baby, like when they clean that baby off and they put the baby down and you're like, I'll do anything for this kid. Like, this is such a happy moment. And Jesus says, like, through all the labor, but when you hold the baby, and it makes it worth it. I think Jesus says you forget about the pain, and my wife says you don't forget about the pain, but it makes the pain worth it. It makes the pain like, okay, that was worth it. This moment of joy, and that's this whole movie. It's like, man, yes, it's a mess. It's not going to be clean and painless when you birth a baby, but the potential and the joy and the life that comes out of it. And that's this whole movie, man. This whole movie is like, it's messy and a lot of things happen that you don't want to happen. You don't want to have to poop in front of everybody, like in the birth, right? Like when you don't have to do all this. Like, you don't want your kid to get married when she's still in high school or whatever it was, however old she was. You don't want them to get pregnant, right away. You don't want your kid to have to deal with porn and get angry at his dad and have a dad who rejects his own son. Like, wow, so heartbreaking. Like, so many heartbreaking moments in this movie. But in the end, like the moment that I love, one of the moments I love is when Jason Robards rips the no smoking sign off and he's just beaming with happiness. With all the family is there and it's loud and they're talking and all these conversations and that's life, man. I mean, but that was the holy moment to me. Not in a, like I said, not in a religious, only using a pipe organ holy moment. Like, holy moment as in, this is real. This is genuine. This has meaning. And that's one of the reasons I love this movie is not only do they do a great job with the script and the movie, like how you have 18 different stories going on and like you're totally engaged. But just that heart of the movie that keeps going back to this is worth it.
Well, and so this is going to lead us to the other clip that we're going to play. And unfortunately, we can't play the final clip where everybody's in the hospital waiting room.
There's no talking.
Because there's no talking. But what you see, you made this point earlier. Everyone is transformed.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about what character changed throughout the movie. And in this movie, everyone did.
Yeah.
And so we're going to play, I think, sort of the clip, the story that this movie is most known for, where grandma talks about the roller coaster and how life and being a parent basically is like a roller coaster. But in this first piece of it, because we know life's messy, life is both messy and holy. And
Amen. How
are we going to respond? And so that's the question that I'm going to ask as we listen to this clip, and then we'll talk about it on the backside of how can we respond.
Isn't that demented? That a grown man's happiness depends on whether a 9-year-old catches a pop-up? I mean, what if he missed?
But he didn't.
But he could have.
But he didn't.
But he could have.
But he didn't, Gil. You threw him 12 million pop-ups in the backyard. You cut the odds considerably. If you hadn't, ow.
But there's 3 of them. And you want to have 4. And then the 4th one could be Larry. And they're going to do a lot of things. I mean, baseball's the least of it. And in all those things, sometimes they're going to miss.
Sometimes they won't.
Sometimes they will.
Sometimes they won't.
Sometimes they will.
What do you want me to give you? Guarantees? These are kids, not appliances. Life is messy.
I hate messy. It's so messy.
You know, when I was 19, Grandpa took me on a roller coaster.
Oh?
Up, down, up, down. Oh, what a ride.
What a great story.
I always wanted to go again. You know, it was just interesting to me that a ride could make me so frightened, so scared, so sick, so excited and so thrilled all together. Some didn't like it. They went on the merry-go-round. That just goes around. Nothing. I like the roller coaster. You get more out of it. Well, I'll be seeing you in the car.
She's a very smart lady. Come on, Taylor, your ears are ready.
Yeah, a minute ago I was really confused about life, and then Grandma came in with her wonderful and affecting roller coaster story, and now everything's great again.
I happen to like the roller coaster, okay? As far as I'm concerned, your grandmother is brilliant. Come on, Taylor. Come on, hurry up.
Yeah, if she's so brilliant, how come she's sitting in our neighbor's car?
The best. So there's one character in the movie that doesn't change, and that's the grandmother. The grandmother is the moral compass of this story. And the grandmother,
And she gets passed around from family to
she
family.
gets passed around. Like I didn't notice that as much as I did this time. I was like, I'd kind of forgotten that she keeps getting passed around, and she becomes kind of a catalyst in these homes. She becomes a catalyst in these homes, and she speaks truth. You know, she goes in, and the mom was watching
She
the
needs
kids
a man.
born. She needs a man. And she gets a man. And so there's some amazingly sweet moments in the movie as well. But she is a genius. She is the one that doesn't change. She is having fun at the birthday party. She's while everyone else is freaking out, where's Cowboy Dan or whatever, she's changing her voice with the helium, and she's, doing all this stuff. So all that to say is it is genius. And I agree. And I remember, and I've said it before when I told my wife, like this on our wedding day, this is not going to be the best day we've ever had together. We're going to have adventures, and but that's the marriage vows, right? Like whether you did those exact vows or not, right? But a lot of people have those marriage vows of in sickness and in health and rich, and like there's an admission in the commitment that it's going to be a roller coaster. And we're committed to hanging on together through this thing. And it is boring. I seriously never understood merry-go-rounds. Like my daughter loved them when she was little, so we would do them sometimes. But I never liked them, even as a kid. I was like, when can I go on the roller coaster? Like I never understood why people are like,
When can I jump on the bungee jump?
Wait, what? Why? And maybe it's I'm a guy, but my daughter is more like me in that, my younger daughter, Hosanna. And so all of that to say is I love that contrast where if you want safe, but you don't get the joy either. You don't get the screams of joy. You don't get the scream of joy when he catches the last out and you win the game and you're not in last place. And he'd been praying desperately, God, just one game, God, like, come on. Like, and if you've ever been in one of those situations where like that comes through and you're like, and you do have this, like he was happier than if they had won the championship, right? I mean, like, he was so happy because, of those moments. And that's what it means to grow with people, to live with people, to be intimate with people. And I love that part. And it's just kind of one more theme that we could maybe end on, but that whole thing of life is messy. If you're going to teach a kid how to eat, you're going to have to deal with a lot of food on their face. I'm just saying, like, it's going to be messy, but in the end, what you're after is life. And I love that. And I just love that theme through this movie. Because I think a lot of guys, I think it would help them to show up if they realize it's just going to be messy sometimes. It's not always going to work out. It's not always going to be, sometimes things are going to happen you don't expect and you don't like, but just keep showing up and things will happen.
And
sometimes
not to channel,
they will.
Sometimes they won't. And not to channel, Goodwill Hunting, but when life gets messy, it's not your fault.
Right.
Like, because we, as sort of responsible human beings, we want to take all the blame for everything. Like, when it's messy, it's just messy. And it's a lot easier to navigate when we're not trying to force it back into the merry-go-round.
Right.
And understanding, we are on a roller coaster. Life's going to go up. Life's going to go down. Sometimes he'll catch it. Sometimes he won't. And that's just the way it is. And there's a line that you love that we talked about. And I'm going to bring it up because I think that it's key sort of to converging it. So when Gil finds out she's pregnant, he's just quit his job in a very dramatic fashion. And she's like, "Can you get it back?" And like you were talking about, men need respect. She's like, "I'm not going back on my knees to kiss his butt to say, give me my job back." And they get into this whole discussion, this argument. And as he's going out, he's got to go to the last Little League game. And he looks back and she says, "Do you have to?" Because they're in this conversation. They're trying to figure things out.
Right.
And he says, "My whole life is have to." And I think that if we take that line and we apply it to the roller coaster, we think we have to.
Right.
We have to work. We have to do this. We have to do, we have to become Cowboy Dan. We have to get the piñata open.
Oh my God. I love that. Oh,
but you know what he didn't have to do? Throw 12 million pop-ups to his son.
Right.
He didn't have to do that. We put this pressure of have to on ourselves that is false. For me, it's like, because again, going back to that idea of it's not your fault. Yeah. If your kids are into porn, that's not because you sucked as a dad. If your daughter gets pregnant, it's not because you sucked as a dad. If your son is suicidal, that's not because you sucked as a dad. It's because our kids are born not perfect, but broken. The brokenness is already there.
Yeah.
And we carry too much of a burden when we think we have to. If I don't do this, my kid's going to grow up and be a serial killer or run off and join the circus or all these horrible things, right? What if he doesn't? What if he doesn't? What if we doesn't? And that comes out of that fear of have to.
Yeah.
Because I loved that contrast, what you said. Yes, because if your kids play sports or do anything, you experience it. Watching your son pitch is horrible because you live and die by every strike or ball.
Oh man, right?
Or hit. It's painful. But that idea, like, my whole life is have to, but it doesn't have to be.
There's a difference between religion and walking with God, right? Walking with God and growing in God will, by its very nature, be difficult. Count it all joy when you come under various trials, and right, like, it will. In this world, you will have trouble. Like, the narrow road is narrow because it's
going to get bumpy.
It's going to, the merry-go-round is the easy way that leads to destruction. I'm just saying, like, that's why that's such an amazing contrast. But see, what religion does is religion tries to put you on a merry-go-round. Religion tries to make it safe. Religion
And
tries
call
to
it a roller coaster.
and call it a roller coaster and charge you for it. But they, sorry, but they try to make it. They try to make the birth clean. They try to make life clean. And there's a great scripture, and maybe you can quote it correctly, but it's like if there's oxen in the stall, there's crap in the stall. Like if you don't want to deal with crap, then you don't want the oxen either. But with oxen, like oxen was a symbol of power and strength and wealth, right? And it's like you don't get to have what you long for without having to deal with some crap. Do you have it actual?
The official verse. It's Proverbs 14:4. Where there are no oxen, the manger is clean.
Right.
But abundant crops come by the strength of the ox.
Right. So to have those moments of joy, to have those moments of, you're going to have to deal with at least the possibility of sorrow. And you probably will I can almost guarantee you'll deal with sorrow in order to
Oxen
get to the
make
joy.
a lot of shit.
Oxen make a lot. And I'm saying all this to say, like, but it's God wants to give you those things that your heart longs for. And it longs for that strength, that wealth, and I don't mean money wealth, but the wealth of relationships, the wealth of contentment and purpose and joy and all of that stuff. And you're going to have to go through some challenges to get there, because we're not perfect. And so God molds us and shapes us. And sometimes it's not only is it that it's not our fault, but sometimes it's a commendation that God puts us in certain situations. Sometimes God's like, I'm going to give you this because I know you can handle it. Now, that's not very reassuring to some people, because they're like, well, then that doesn't sound very nice.
Well, look at like Mary and Martha and Lazarus, right? They were chosen to go through that.
Chosen to go through that. And that was not fun. But, I think it was, oh man, what was his name? Steve Harvey. It was Steve Harvey. And he's not the only one who said it, but he was one of the ones that I've seen say it, where he's talking about giving these little inspirational talks, while he's on the set of whatever show. But he's like, look, you have to change your mentality from I have to I get to. You have to change that mentality, because religion is I have to check off this box. I got to jump through that hoop. I got to sacrifice this cow. I got to ring this bell. I got to, tithe this 10%. I have to do this, instead of realizing, and I was talking about Psalm 122. I'm studying for this Sunday, where the first line is, I was so glad when they said, let's go to the house of the Lord. In other words, like, but I get to go participate in heaven on earth. Like that's what the temple in Jerusalem for David represented. If you know about the temple, like they put, leaves and fruit and all these sort of symbols in the Holy of Holies. Like this was the Garden of Eden. This was heaven represented on a mountain on earth, like Sinai and all that stuff. And I'm just saying all that to say, like, so when he's saying, man, I get to go there, I'm so happy I get to go. But I'm sorry, but there are a lot of Jews that gave up really quickly on all the ceremonies and stuff, because they didn't see what they got to be a part of. They didn't see the joy of God chose us as a people when we didn't deserve it. And he gave us this land when we didn't deserve it. And he's allowing us to participate in heaven on earth. And that's how it is now, because church, Jerusalem on earth, is not in a building now. It's people. It's the family of God. We're going back to family. It's the family of God and disciples making disciples. And how often do we say on a Sunday morning, like, oh, I guess I got to go. I got to tithe. I got to read the Bible. I got to pray, or whatever.
Just like
whatever
the kids. Do I have to read? No. You get to read.
You get to read. And so all of that stuff is to say, like, that is the renewing of our mind that has to happen. But it's not just a simple thing of saying, oh, just start saying I get to, but you have to see the blessing that even though it's messy, there's a blessing if you just keep showing up, keep loving, keep choosing. And so here's the thing with the roller coaster. See, roller coasters, some of them, I guess, just go up and down, whatever. But a lot of roller coasters nowadays, you're hanging and there's twists and you go upside down. And my point is, like, the reason why we do this podcast is because no movie is patterned after the merry-go-round. No movie is patterned after that. No movie is patterned after this is safe and predictable. Like, the movies are patterned after we're expectation. Oh, like, what's happening? Oh, now here's a twist. I didn't see that coming, right? And that's why we love movies. And even though people choose, movies are safe to a certain degree, but even though we choose safety, sometimes we're drawn to these movies because that's the life God created us to have. He created us to have these lives of twists and the unexpected and challenges and purpose and goals and all that stuff that, you're learning about in the screenwriting class, right? Like, all of that stuff, like,
yeah,
that's what we were created for. And at the end, when Gil finally gets it, he finally gets, because his little kid is making a mess of the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs moment. You're being mean to my sister, and he's tearing apart the set, and everybody's yelling, "Get that kid off the stage!" And he's all anxious, and at some point he just realizes, he just rolls with it. He's like, "Okay, here we are," and he laughs, because
after a minute,
but
starts making the face.
But we all do that, our first reaction a lot of times is selfish. That doesn't mean, now hear me, that doesn't mean you have sinned. Just because your first reaction is selfish, that doesn't make you a sinner. Because Jesus said, "I don't want to do what you want me to do. This is going to hurt," right? But he dealt with it. He was honest. Like, you have to be honest and go, okay, well, that was a little selfish. I made my kids' issue about me, right? Now let you take captive every thought. That doesn't mean you don't have the thoughts at all. That means when the thought comes up, I had a beautiful conversation with a friend of mine who has some thoughts that he deals with. He said, what I had to realize, and we talked about this, I said, dude, that is so beautiful. What he had to realize is my thoughts and my emotions are not me. That's not my identity. That's not where my identity is. My identity is in Christ. So now a thought comes up, and instead of feeling bad about it, I can say, well, that thought's not me. What do I do with that thought? Right? Because there's something deeper than our thoughts and our emotions. That's our spirit. That's what's been renewed. And we have to submit our thoughts and our emotions. We can't, my mentor used to say, you can't keep a bird from landing on your head, but you can keep it from building a nest there. In other words, you can't keep the thought from happening, but you can keep it from rooting around in there and becoming part of your worldview, right? And that's the renewing of our mind that has to happen. We have to see the blessing. We have to see that it's not a have to, that God is offering heaven on earth, and all this messy, and it looks chaotic to us. And I'm telling you, if you look at blood, if you look at the cells in blood, it's chaos, right? If you just look at the cells in the bloodstream, it's just frenetic. And you know more than me. This is like your actual job. But it's frenetic and it's just chaotic. But if you go all the way back, you see a whole body. You see a whole body at work. It's organization, and there's movement, and there's strength. But if you focus, that's what we need. That's why we need to go to God with these things. And be like, okay, God, like you did with your daughter. Okay, God, show me. And he spoke to you. He spoke to you about the future. You're looking at it right now, but I'm telling you, you don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. I do. So just roll with me, right? And I think that was a beautiful example of what we've been talking about.
As we wrap up and close and give you guys some action items, one would be obviously see the movie. But the question, what's more important, a clean barn or a bountiful harvest? Because you're not going to get a bountiful harvest with a clean barn. You're just going to have a clean barn. And I mean, if that's what floats your boat, go for it. But it's going to be a pretty empty life, empty stalls, no fruit, no harvest. You've got to get into the muck, the mire, got to get into the shit, because oxen are going to do that.
That's right.
You can't have oxen without a ton of crap. But when you get to that final scene of the movie where you're looking around and you're seeing the people engaging, the fathers, Nathan making faces at his daughter, no more flashcards, but he's being goofy. When you see all the babies, whether it's Gil and Karen's or Julie and Todd's, you see all the kids and you see the change, and you're like, oh, that's sort of a happily ever after moment, right? But what makes it meaningful, what makes it good, is because you know the crap they went through to get there.
Yep. Good.
You know the pain that it takes to get there, because it's the stuff we have to go through will hurt. Like, it's the roller coaster is terrifying and chilling and not always safe. Sometimes it's one of those carnival rides that maybe has a few bolts missing. But we know that we're safe in the arms of our Father. As we mentioned, the perfect Father. What is it that the saying that life is 99% or 1% what happens, 99% of how I react to it?
Right.
And that's the challenge. How are we going to react to it? Because if you look at your life and you're like, oh, that oxen crapped on my floor again, like it's a shock, then you're going to live your life like Gil did. What if he missed it? What if he dropped it? What if he doesn't? But if you can say, oh yeah, I was expecting that to happen, not at all surprised, much easier to navigate, much easier to go through life.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that we miss out on so much adventure and joy if we think we get to control everything. There's another verse I'm thinking of where it says, man makes his plans, but his steps are ordered by the Lord. And we have to renew our mind to that, trusting him, like you said, and just realizing his goal is our joy. And Jesus even said, I'm telling you these things so your joy may be full, complete, lacking nothing. But the disciples went through some hard stuff. Right. I'm just saying, and they were definitely not perfect when Jesus was on earth trying to teach them crap and tell them stuff. And they were like, just tell us, what does that mean? They didn't get it half the time. And sometimes we don't either. And so like you're saying, we have to have that trust and have that hope that, man, if I just keep showing up and stick with God, even through my mistakes, trying to do that, like he's got it and he'll show himself strong, because I've seen him do it. I've seen him do it so many times, and he'll keep doing it. So yeah, watch the movie and ask God. So here's my thing. Ask God to show you the blessings, because he's ready. He's ready to, he loves that conversation. He's like, do you see what that person did for you? See what that person does? Because anybody can be a critic. Like, critic is the easiest job to be. That's the easiest job. But to be an encourager is love, and it is beautiful. And so just to ask God, show me the blessings, show me where you're blessing me already. And you'll see it, and it'll give you joy.
So we hope that you had a fantastic, joy-filled Father's Day. Amen. After the fact. And this has been Paul McDonald and Britt Mooney talking about Parenthood. We hope that you enjoyed it. I hope share it with somebody. Share it with some of the fathers that you know that are maybe even struggling to find the joy and feel a lot of have-tos. So share this with a guy who needs it. And I hope that you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, Who am I to be?